Thank you very much. We will be beginning our Roundtable 3, and the title of our Roundtable 3 is a topic that is very interesting and mutual concern to both U.S. and China. As you know, we at Committee of 100 look for ways in which we can be a bridge between the two nations. And there's nothing that bridges two entities better than shared challenges. And of course, as we look at both aging cities as well as the development of new cities, having sustainability in our urban centers is such a major issue. Over the next 10, 15 years, China alone will be moving 300 million people into cities. That is like moving almost the entire population of America into cities, so it's a daunting challenge. At the same time, in America, we have many cities that are aging, with infrastructure, waterworks, utilities that are not efficient to be rebuilt or rethought. So this is an area of great interest to both countries. And so our roundtable is called Sustainable Cities, Building Blocks and Stumbling Blocks. We will have our roundtable moderated by Jonathan Rose, who is the president of Jonathan Rose Companies, who has a great deal of interest in both U.S. and China development. But we have a very special treat before we begin our roundtable. Despite his very, very filled schedule, we are so pleased to have the Honorable Mayor Michael Bloomberg with us. Of course, Mayor Bloomberg runs this great city of ours, which in many ways has its high notes and low notes. There are many parts of the city that are new and exciting, but there are many parts that are old that he would like to bring into a more green age. Mayor Bloomberg is also the head right now of an organization called C40s, which draws upon the leading 40 cities of the world to come together to find solutions to sustainability. So without further ado, I pass the mic to Mayor Bloomberg.
May, thank you. I did take over this organization, become chairman of C40, which is really, it's a bunch of cities sharing best practices and focusing on the environment. And the point of bringing it up is we had our this year's annual meeting is in Sao Paulo in about 3 weeks, but a year ago we were in Hong Kong. And Paul, I will say the Kohn Pedersen Vox building in Hong Kong is just spectacular. You guys deserve a lot of credit for great design. But the most interesting thing was that the Chinese government sent 6 mayors to be on a panel to talk about the environment. And that was really unique because up until now, fundamentally, the Chinese government didn't want to worry about the environment. They were more worried about economic development, having an enormous number of people, and they've done a great job of bringing people into middle class, but they still have a long ways to go. And so economic development has been what they've focused on, but for the first time, they really are starting to focus on the environment. China, like every other developing country, generates a lot of greenhouse gases, coal-fired plants and pollution in the rivers and that sort of thing. We have the same problem in America, and I think you're going to see China leading the environmental movement more so than in America. In China, they're not discussing whether or not there is whether or not what we're doing is hurting the environment. They accept that it's hurting the environment. Their question is should they move from economic development to spend some of their capital in trying to clean up the air and clean up the water and make this planet better, whereas we in New York, not in New York, but we in the United States are still arguing about whether or not we are doing damage to the environment, and sadly we don't listen to our own scientists. Anyways, I did want to start by congratulating on 20 years of fostering better relationships with China, the Committee of 100. 20 is a wonderful anniversary to have. I cannot remember when I was 20 years old, but nevertheless, I think it was a good time. It was in the 1960s, and we have a saying here that if you can remember the 60s, you weren't there. Anyways, the Committee of 100 really does work on fostering better relationships between China and America, and that's particularly important here in New York City, a city that not only has strong commercial and cultural ties with China, but also we have the largest Chinese population of any city outside of Asia. So as we say in Cantonese, Gong Hai. My Mandarin, well, let's say I'm still working on that, but that may be because I've had my chance to brush up on Cantonese. My advanced person who's with me, Jamie Lee, speaks fluent Cantonese, but I've been working her over in Mandarin. It's very iffy. Is that right? Are you getting any better? You said no. Anyways, the C40 mobilizes many of the world's great cities to address the topic of this afternoon's panel, urban sustainability, and it really is a very big issue for New York City. We have a city with a population of 8.4 million. We expect it to be 9 million by the year 2030. 4 years ago, we launched a very ambitious environmental program called Plan YC and then updated it just last month. It is a comprehensive strategy for addressing the sustainability challenges that face our growing cities. And there's 127 different concrete things, and I'm happy to say something like 98% of them we've actually started and some we've completed. These challenges are all similar challenges to those faced in China, a nation which really has transformed itself from a largely rural society to an increasing urban one. In fact, many observers believe that by mid-century, as much as 75% of China's population will be city dwellers. So China has a very big interest in looking at what other cities who've become more urban have done in terms of how they've made mistakes and how they've managed to hopefully fix some of those. And China's urbanization, incidentally, is not restricted just to China. You see this throughout Asia. As recently as 1950, only one of the world's metropolitan areas, New York, had a population greater than 10 million people. Today, there are 17 such megacities, and 11 of them are in Asia. And more than any other factor, that's the reason that today, for the first time in history, a majority of the Earth's people live in cities. And that makes the work of the C40 climate group so critical. Cities really are on the cutting edge of climate change. The cities are where more than 70% of the world's greenhouse gases are produced. City dwellers, many of whom live in coastal areas, are especially vulnerable to the effect of climate change. And the increased burning of fossil fuels in the world's cities is not only a long-range climate change issue, it's directly linked to the immediate congestion, pollution, and public health challenges that the world's cities are facing today. I've always thought that if you try to change the world by talking about what's going to happen to the planet in 2050, most people's eyes glaze over. If you point out to them that the air that they are breathing today, the water that they are drinking today, the business community that is getting stagnated and preventing them from making more money today, then all of a sudden it becomes much more real, and you can sign people on to making change and making sacrifice to get things done. C40 cities, on balance, are addressing these issues on a broad front. They have implemented a range of innovative policies, from improving mass transit to greater energy efficiency in major buildings, an area where I'm proud to say New York City has taken the lead. New York City differs from most other cities in that 80% of our greenhouse gases come from buildings and only 20% from transportation. It's exactly the reverse of what most cities have, where 80% comes from transportation, only 20% from buildings. But New York City, because of the density, because people walk, and because people take mass transit, it is exactly the reverse. And we have a number of programs here, whether it's having green roofs, which is what we call a roof with plantings on it that absorbs water and keeps the heat from penetrating into the building, or painting the buildings reflective white to keep the sun from heating the buildings. Those kinds of things make a big difference. We have a plan to phase out number 6 heating oil, which is this very heavy heating oil that pollutes the planet. And